It is once again my pleasure to welcome you to this podcast of My House Ministries. My name is Phil Eshelman. In this presentation, I want to talk about the importance of choosing democracy over totalitarianism. Please consider this an addendum to the chapter Totalitarianism versus Democracy in my book Out of the Abyss. In Canada, the specter of totalitarian government is raised through the operations of guerrilla organizations that control the streets through the sale of arms, illicit drugs, and prostitution. It is inevitable that the billions of dollars in narcotics sales begin to affect the political balance within a country. Such operations to shape the political landscape were perfected by the French Colonel Trinquer in Algiers, and his methods have been studied by governments around the world. Trinquer was a military genius who engaged in the implementation of force through social engineering. The reason this becomes relevant in the West is because the ability of foreign governments to act as a force multiplier on domestic organized crime creates the very real national security threat we are faced with in the Western Hemisphere today. Let me repeat this poignant point. The application of foreign political interests upon domestic organized crime creates the vortex that shapes the battlefield of an asymmetric war. An example of asymmetry of war would be Chinese operatives in British Columbia using Vietnamese nationals to supply illicit drugs to Hell's Angels in the United States. The ability to undermine the social fabric of society allows the administrators of foreign interests greater ability to move through society and implement their will. The formal terms of these types of operations we call low-intensity conflict or soft power. The unfortunate byproduct of the low-intensity conflict that society faces is that guerrilla forces rule by fear. The projection of fear onto the community makes the community more malleable in the hands of the guerrilla forces, and they become the de facto power in the community. In essence, the legitimate democratic authority is replaced and the existing government becomes a figurehead of the actual power. Government is bound by laws, but the guerrilla fighter is not. The idea or principle of democracy in its purest form is the ability of the majority to choose a representative government. One of the privileges of democracy is that we are governed by laws and not by the whim of a dictator who can order execution of dissidents at will. Interacting with organized crime through the purchase of illicit drugs, sexual service, or black market commodity strengthens the guerrilla organization and undermines the democracy that has defined North America as a just and fair society. It is an unfortunate testament that governments in the Western Hemisphere have been derelict in duty when it comes to national security. The multitude of organizations using the asymmetry of war to gain social ascendancy has outpaced the counterinsurgency efforts in North America. The truth of this is in the numbers. In British Columbia alone, the marijuana trade is said to be over $7 billion a year. This is one crop, one commodity, in one province, and military funding for operations to counter this problem have not kept pace. It is crucial that Christians exercise the power and authority invested in them by democratic rule. The socialist agenda of those who have chosen this method to subdue governments in the West is totalitarian in nature. For this reason, I adjure you by the authority of Jesus, the Son of the living God, to stand up, church, and fight. Defend your nation. Defend your children. We are faced with the dissolution of government through the corruption of our oracles of power. The enemy is upon us. He has chosen a most powerful weapon with which to oppose us. He has chosen our own corruption to destroy us. Armies of the West, rise up. You are at war.